Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Thomas of Woodstock and we get to hear from Cheney today in Act 2, Scene 3. Now remember, he's sort of a manservant to Woodstock, and in this particular scene we are sort of reliving the parliamentary scene, but through the eyes of the women who were in the next room while the whole thing was going on, because they weren't really allowed to be there. So Queen Anne and the Duchess of Gloucester, who is Woodstock's wife, and the Duchess of Ireland, who is York's niece, are all there, and they are lamenting what Richard is doing to the country. Anne is selling all of her stuff and giving all of her money to charity because the people are suffering so much, and the other two ladies are like, oh, you're so good, and the people aren't going to mutiny, they love you too much, all these sorts of things. And she's like, but I still feel really bad for the people. So she has them load up all these trunks with all of her money, all of her jewels, things like that, to take them so that her wealth can be redistributed amongst the poor. And Cheney comes in, he's like, what's this? She's like, that's money for the poor going out. And he's like, your highness, your majesty, hello everybody. He's like, sorry to cut you off, but Duchess of Gloucester, your husband is leaving for Plashy and he would like you to go with. So there's all this. Now the queen is like, now I have to be left by myself in this difficult time, and the Duchess is like, I wish I could be here, but my husband, I kind of gotta go. And they get a little bit more information from Cheney about what was happening in the actual Parliament room. They're like, are they still in there? What's going on? And he confirms that the uncles have been, stripped of their titles, all that sort of stuff. And the Queen says, well, what about Richard? Where's Richard? Is he still with the flatterers? What are they doing? And Cheney says, they sit in council to devise strange fashions and suit themselves in wild and antic habits, such as this kingdom never yet beheld. French hose, Italian cloaks, and Spanish hats, Polonian shoes with peaks a handful long, tied to their knees with chains of pearl and gold. Their plumed tops fly waving in the air, a cubit high above their wanton heads. Tressilian, with King Richard, likewise sits, devising taxes and strange shifts for money, to build again the hall at Westminster, to feast and revel in. And when abroad they come, 400 archers in a guard attends them. So none of this is really news to the audience. We knew that this is what King Richard and the flatterers were plotting anyway, but he has some, I'm going to go ahead and say that he has some opinions about what they're doing. They're outfitting themselves in all the fanciest, finest clothes, stuff that has never been seen in England before, and you get the impression from this speech that Cheney thinks that it's sort of ridiculous how they are dressing themselves. And then he's like, and also Tressilian, who is named Chief Justice, is sitting there with King Richard, and they're figuring out how to tax the people more and shift some money around so they can rebuild the hall at Westminster so they can have these massive feasts. And also, whenever he goes traveling, he wants to have 400 archers go with him as his protection, like as his king's guard. And Anne is like, Richard, you're destroying the country. This is all very, very bad news. So one by one, then they take their leaves. The Duchess of Gloucester obviously has to go with her husband. She's like, take care of yourself. I'm going to go and see what's that, but we're going to stay in touch. And the Duchess of Ireland is like, yeah, I'm going to go hang out with my uncle. And the Queen has just a couple lines at the very end where she's like, this is not going to play out well. And that's the end of Act 2, Scene 3, with her sort of dreading that she's left by herself to deal with all of this stuff that Richard is doing to the country. So again, we have Richard and his flatterers on one side, we have the uncles on the other side, and we know that Queen Anne is firmly of the uncles' belief that the flatterers are bad news and Richard is doing bad things to the country, but she's doing what she can to try to help. So yeah, that's the end of Act 2, Scene 3. Come on back tomorrow and we will start in on Act 3. I'll see you then. Mwah.